associated most of the time with the, what is this structure?
Artery.
Your pulmonary
Artery.
artery. So most of the time, the airway is accompanied by the pulmonary artery, but not the vein. Okay, and it is enclosed in same investing connective tissue as the airway. Identify this pointed structure. Respiratory bronchiole. Identify pointed structure.
Alveolar duct.
Alveolar duct. Identify pointed structure.
Alveolar sac.
Alveolar sac. This is the high power of this part. Okay, so you have simple ciliated columnar. Okay, identify full structure.
Alveolar.
How about this one?
Alveolar. Alveolar.
Alveolus. Okay, this is an alveolus. High power na to. Alveolus na yan. Okay? Well, this is
Ayun, malabang ngayon. Alveolar.
okay. So, one pocket of space here is an alveolus. Okay, this is a sac. Okay, alveolar sac. This is an alveolus. Okay, you see the difference?
Yes.
Okay, yung sac is composed of many alveoli. Pag ganito lang, that's one alveolus. Okay, and an alveolus is separated from another alveolus by
Alveolar
what
septum.
structure?
Alveolar septum.
Ano to?
Interalveolar septum.
Interalveolar septum, or your alveolar septum or alveolar wall. Okay? So what do you find in the alveolar wall?
Pores of cone.
That's where you can find the respiratory membrane or the blood-air barrier. Okay? But by just using our microscope, we will not we cannot identify the 3 layers of the respiratory membrane. Okay. We can see capillaries because capillary contains red blood cells inside. Okay, so we can see the capillaries, but not the layers of the respiratory membrane. Okay. The flat cells that line the alveolar wall is which cell?
Type 1.
Type 1. Okay, the plump cells,
Type 2.
okay, like this. The plump cells that is lesser in number, okay, is the type
2.
2. What's the function of the type 2 again?
Produce sulfaphan.
And
Filtration.
do you know, Miss Leong? Wait lang daw. What's the function of type 2 aside from producing surfactant?
Stem cell.
Stem cell, pwede siyang, it serves as a stem cell or a progenitor cell. It can differentiate into type 1 or type 2. Okay, the mature type. Okay, so if you need type 1, it will differentiate into type 1. Okay, identify pointed structure.
Respiratory bronchiole.
This part. Identify
May smooth tumaas.
Yan.
Respiratory bronchial.
Dito.
Respiratory.
Yes, Mr. Bascara. Louder, please. Oh, at this part, this is the duct at this portion. Okay, but at this area, you still have the respiratory bronchiole. Okay? This is the respiratory and it will be continuous with your alveolar duct.
Basta pag
Okay, identify pointed structure.
alveolar sa
Alveolar sac. Okay, identify pointed structure.
alveolar duct.
Alveolar duct. Okay, and these are
Terminal bronchi.
okay, pulmonary vein because they are separate, they are not associated with an airway. Okay, these are pulmonary veins, these two. Okay, about at this portion, identify
Terminal bronchiole.
terminal bronchiole, but at this area, identify respiratory bronchiole. Okay, identify
Respiratory bronchial.
respiratory bronchiole. Ito, very obvious. Identify
Alveolar duct.
alveolar duct. And this is,
Alveolar sac.
and this is,
Alveolar sac.
okay, so perfect uli kayo, ha? On this part. Identify,
Respiratory bronchiole.
Bronchial.
identify,
Alveolus.
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 Okay.
Ano yan?
Bronchial.
Identify,
Bronchial.
Bronchus.
bronchus. Bakit? Why bronchus?
There's
Okay, this is respiratory epithelium. So even though it's not very clear, you have goblet cells.
Yung gland.
Yun, goblet cell. You have submucosal glands here and there.
where's the cartilage?
Okay, randomly distributed smooth muscle.
Wala ng
And
cartilage.
though I think this is the cartilage, but it's not well defined.
Okay. So you
And
can
it is, again, okay, like here, is associated with pulmonary artery. Okay, identify bracketed structure, the whole structure. Bronchus. Okay, respiratory epithelium, smooth muscle, cartilage, glands. Okay, identify the whole organ. The whole organ. Trachea. Okay, the lining is respiratory epithelium or the pseudostratified columnar ciliated with goblet. Okay, you have in the lamina in the submucosa the hyaline cartilage and your submucosal glands. Okay, this is the longitudinal section. This is the type of slide in your slide boxes. Okay, any one of you have in your slide boxes the cross section? Walang may cross section.
wala po ma.
Okay, so still the longitudinal section of the trachea. And this is the cross section of the trachea. This is the end of the C shape. Okay, this is the end of your C-shaped hyaline cartilage, the respiratory epithelium. Okay, and this is the muscle on the posterior part of your trachea. Okay, Yeah, this is the hyaline cartilage again. High power. Okay, you always notice, if you notice during practical exam, if we ask you to identify the organ, it's always on scanner. Okay, scanner magnification, and you can move the slide if the question is identify organ. Okay, so again, yan, pseudostratified columnar ciliated with goblet. You have submucosal glands and your hyaline cartilage for the trachea.
Pwede na po ba nang i-answer na respiratory epithelium na? Sa
Yes, if
lungs?
if the question is identify, it's respiratory epithelium. Pag-classify, pseudostratified ciliated columnar with goblet. Tingnan natin. Can you identify the whole organ?
I. I.
Retina.
The whole organ
Eye.
is the eye. Okay, or eyeball.
Eyeball. Pag-organ.
Okay.
Yung organ.
And how many tunics of the eye can you see in this field alone?
Three.
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 Sclera choroid.
How many tunics? How many tunics do you have or coverings of the eye?
Three.
Three. But in this portion, how many layers can you see?
Two.
Two lang, because you don't see the fibrous. What can you see there?
The
Okay, the retina. Okay, retinal layer or the nervous, and the vascular.
Nervous vascular.
Okay. Okay, so the retina, the nervous tunic is composed of how many layers?
10. 10.
The nervous tunic,
10.
okay, 10. The 10. But the 10 is divided into two. You have the neural and the non-neural. Okay, which is the non-neural? What layer is the non-neural?
Parsicle.
You only have one non-neural layer.
The retinal pigment epithelium.
Bata. Yung visual kasi nakakaya dito. Parsiling.
What is the non-neural layer?
Parciliaris.
10 layers, di ba? So which is the non-neural?
The retina. The very first.
The innermost or the outermost?
Outermost.
Ano yung outermost?
Retinal pigment epithelium.
Oh, bakit walang sumasagot kanina? The pigment. The retinal pigment. Okay, if you don't take chances, you will not succeed. Take chances. Okay, failing is part of the game.
Non-neural.
Yeah.
Diba? You cannot
Pigment epithelium.
enjoy success if you do not experience failure.
Ano daw?
Nice.
Lagi ka nasa taas eh.
Nice.
So, the outermost, the layer 10 or the retinal pigment 10 epithelium layer.
Pabaliktad siya.
Okay. So, this is the pigmented epithelium layer is on this part because it is attached on what layer of the choroid?
Outer.
Dapat, di ba, nakasama siya sa retina. But, this is the neural part. But the non-neural part is attached to what layer of the choroid?
The
Para,
innermost layer.
Anong layer ng choroid? Brooks membrane. Okay, it is attached on the Brooks membrane. Kaya nandito siya. Okay. And of course, this part, this covering is the
Choroid.
what tunic?
Tunica vascular.
Vascular tunic, which contains the
Choroid.
Choriocapillary.
choroid capillary and the syempre, Brooks membrane. Okay? It is very vascular and it contains melanin. That's why you have very dark pigmented areas, okay, on this choroid tunic, okay, or choroid layer.
May video cam kasi sa side ko.
Okay. So, how will you be able to identify the layers easily? The 10 layers of the retina. Okay. Paano matatandaan easily the 10 layers? You only have to remember three cellular layers. Diba? What are those 3 cellular layers?
4,
What is
6,
the
8.
innermost? Cellular. This is the cellular where you have the cell bodies. Okay.
Ganglion cell.
This is the ganglionic layer. This is the
Inner
nuclear layer where you have the bipolar cells. And this is the outer nuclear layer. So between the ganglionic and the inner nuclear, you have this
inner plexiform.
inner plexiform layer, and between the inner and outer nuclear is the
Outer plexiform.
outer plexiform layer. Okay, so beneath the inner nuclear layer, of course, you have the
Outer limiting membrane.
ano yung receptor? Yes,
Photoreceptor.
Will,
Rods and cones.
you're raising your hand? Yes.
Layers of rods and cones.
Rods and cones. Okay, this is the layers of your, this is the layer of your rods and cones. And the innermost, of course, you have membranes. This is the
Inner limiting
inner
Limiting.
membrane. Okay, inner membrane, and this is where you have the outer membrane.
outer
Limit.
Okay. Pag plexiform, what is in the plexiform? What structures? Those are just
axons.
axons, nerve fibers. Pag nuclear, layer, and ganglionic, those are the cell bodies.
Bodies.
Okay, and mas importante, of course, are the what layers? Where you have the cell bodies. Okay? So you have to remember those layers where you have the cell bodies.
4, 6, 8.
Okay, so it's just
Four,
the
six,
same.
eight.
This is the pigment epithelium, the retinal pigmented epithelium.
Attach siya sa Brooks membrane.
O na-separate dito.
So it's just the same, the 10 layers. Okay, this is just 9 layers. Okay, the 10th layer is attached to the Brooks membrane.
So,
Okay. Now this is another area of the eyeball, the anterior part. Okay, this is the eyelid. Okay, part of the sclera. What is this? Structure.
Iris.
The iris. And this is the
lens,
lens. And this is your
ciliary body,
ciliary body composed of the
ciliary muscles,
ciliary
Muscle.
muscle and your ciliary
Process.
processes. Okay, what's the function of the ciliary processes?
produce the aqueous humor.
It produce
Aqueous humor.
the aqueous humor. Okay. Produce the aqueous humor. Okay. Arising from the ciliary body, which is dissolved, I think, during tissue processing,
Suspense.
is the ciliary zonule. Okay, the ciliary zonules is attached to
Lens.
the capsule of your lens. Okay, so it is important during accommodation when your ciliary muscle contracts and relaxes. So it thickens and it relaxes. When it during accommodation, it thickens the lens, and during relaxation, during relaxation, it thins out or elongates the lens. Okay, what's the function of the iris? It's also heavily